Get started. My name's Jennifer Ott. I'm the Deputy City Manager for the City of Hayward and oversee the city's efforts to redevelop the Route 238 properties, the former Caltrans properties in the city, and obviously portions in the county as well. Monica, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Monica Davis. I'm the Community Services Manager and also the 238 Project Manager.
And then we have Tim with the city here, who's here just in case we screw up on the technology here in the Zoom. This, as some of you may have heard, this is my first community meeting by Zoom. I've done lots of meetings, but so bear with us as we try this out. We're going to try to actually do some polls, try to make it a little interactive. And a couple kind of ground rules or just kind of housekeeping items. This presentation is being recorded. That way we'll be able to post it and allow people who weren't able to attend or didn't have the right technology, that we can make it available by on our webpage and people can tune in later. Also, there's a Q&A in Zoom, so you're welcome to enter questions there. You're also, at the end, we're going to do, you can raise your hand and we'll answer questions verbally as well as through the Q&A. So if you don't want to raise your hand and talk, you can also just type your question into the Q&A, and Monica will be helping me manage that at the end after we go through the presentation. And then something that I'm not, usually I get to see all your faces and you get to see each other's faces, and so we're trying this through the webinar. We may try later to do it through the meetings app on Zoom if you're familiar, but anyway, it feels a little disconnected. So I just wanted to suggest that through the chat, if you'd like to introduce yourself, you certainly don't have to, but if you want to introduce yourself so folks know who else is on, feel free to use the chat to kind of introduce yourself and say, hey, I'm on here, and type your name. Again, not something you have to do. So we're really here tonight to talk about parcels group 8 and 9. They're two parcels and provide a status update, discuss some next steps. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Assuming I can move the slides. Great. We're going to do an introduction and overview of the 238 properties pretty quickly. A parcel group 8 update, and that's this parcel, I'd say, is probably one of the more complicated parcels of all of them. So the majority will be on parcel group 8, but then we'll also give you an update on parcel group 9, which is nearby, of course, and then open it up for questions and answers. So the first is a polling question. We want to try this out. If you, Monica can unmute herself and kind of explain, but you should see, when the poll comes up, you should see an ability to kind of answer this. We just like to know, it should pop up right now and ask you who's attending. So if you don't mind giving this a shot, we're trying to make this a little more interactive, trying some new technology. If you could choose one of the 4 items there, that would be great. And we're going to have polls throughout here so that we can kind of get some real-time information. So it looks like most of you, there's kind of a real cross-section. Some of you live at parcel group 8. Some of you, a lot of you live in the neighboring area. Just a couple of Hayward residents, and then folks that aren't a neighbor or a Hayward resident, but just generally interested in the project as well. So kind of a good cross-section of interested parties. So thank you again for being here. Great. So for those of you, I think a lot of you have been to some of these meetings before probably, but just for those of you who might be joining for the first time, we have the city of Hayward for a long time has been thinking about planning for these former Caltrans parcels. Obviously, Caltrans at one point in the 60s was looking at building a freeway through the Hayward Hills here. That didn't work out. Those plans were abandoned. And then ultimately, in 2016, Hayward and Caltrans came to an agreement for the city to take over ownership of about 10 parcels, and those are the ones you see up here on the screen. We're here to talk about 8 and 9, the red and green ones, way at the northern end near the freeway entrance. And I will say there was also a 2009 land use study, so a lot of planning has gone into thinking holistically about all of these parcels, including a Hayward foothill trail that was actually codified into our zoning so that every one of these parcels has to build kind of its fair share of the trail, so that we really try to build in public benefits and trail amenities throughout these parcels. So there's been a lot of history here. Again, we're here to talk about 8 and 9. Parcel group 9, I also know there's a lot of questions about this, so I wanted to make sure we touched on this. It's a little, not quite as more complicated, but there are some complexities here. It's a little over 4 acres, about a little over 1.5 acres is in unincorporated Alameda County. It's in actually the Eden area. Here, it's actually a housing element site as well, and then this area is in the city. We had originally, and we've done a lot of the same public meetings, all the public meetings that we've had on Parcel Group 8, we've kind of done as well for Parcel Group 9, so just kind of a summary reminder of that. What we've heard from the community is that we've heard concern, community express some interest in neighborhood amenities, that you used to have some community amenities, now you don't. Also interest in housing. We also heard some concerns about crime and traffic with a hotel. Um, and then also just some freeway, and this is from our council, the planning commission, from the community. There's just obviously the freeway is right there. And so what's the right type of use to have there? And are there ways to develop it to really minimize any air quality impacts and things like that? So that's what we've kind of heard throughout our community process. Our previous direction was from the city council and from staff was to really pursue a hotel. And the reason really being a couple, one is that we were looking at all the parcels, and we were doing a lot of housing on other parcels. We were trying to look for opportunities for some commercial development to help generate some jobs and revenue for the city. And so a hotel, this was one of our best sites for a hotel. I will say because of COVID, where that market has really just been completely decimated, and then a lot of community feedback about not wanting a hotel in the neighborhood, I think we've backed off of that. And I think open really at this point to what do we think could get developed here. We did obtain a text amendment to our zoning to give more flexibility. We think flexibility is the way to go here because the market for this parcel is kind of uncertain, so creating more land use flexibility. So the city council did rezone this property just a couple weeks ago, or less than a month ago, to provide more flexibility. So not precluding, it allows housing, allows hotels, retail, commercial, and give us a lot of flexibility. So this just shows the rezoning. And then kind of our next steps here is we have a lot of uncertainty about this parcel. I'll be honest, I don't know what we're gonna do. I don't know what the right use is yet for that. And so I'd like to hear from you. You know, we've heard you loud and clear. Some of you have said community feedback is not, you don't support a hotel development. And so I think our thought is probably around that same time we go out with a solicitation in the beginning of the year for that market rate portion of Parcel Group 8 is to go out and just test the market and see, hey, developers, what do you think makes sense? What could you finance here to meet that Caltrans price? And then we can look at it. If we don't like any of the proposals or we don't like any of that, then we don't have to, you know, one of the benefits also of public land is we can just land bank. Not forever, but for a while, and we can hold it off until the market gets better. But I think we would want to kind of see and test the market and see what the development community might want to do here. And then we could bring that back to the community. We can have conversations about that. All right, so we've got a polling question here. This one I changed it up, but there's only two. You can vote for two here. But what would be your preferred land uses for this parcel? I think we're very interested to see what you think. So please go ahead and this is our last poll for the night. All right, I think let's go ahead and share the results. So it looks like affordable housing. We've got followed, that's the highest vote getter. I think you can all see this with a mixed use housing, ground floor commercial coming in, and a mix of uses. So really, and then also some strong support for commercial, so office or retail. And what we can do, what I was thinking, and be curious to hear in your questions and answer and other thoughts, is what we can do, even if we go out with a broad solicitation to the development community, we could say is, look, our preference are these uses, and I can use this poll as kind of, look, this is what we want to see. We want to see affordable housing or a mix of housing and ground floor commercial. And even though we might say, look, you're not precluded, you can still propose if you want to do something else, but this is what our preference is. So if you have this in mind, then please do propose, because that's what our community wants, and that's what there's a lot of interest in. So even if we do a broader solicitation to the development community, we can still use this information to try to hone in and really try to attract and market to those developers that fit into some of these categories that you're all telling us that you'd like to see. All right, I think I'm going to close this. Great. And now we're ready for questions and answers. So Monica, do you think I should just unshare my screen, or maybe I'll keep it shared, because I think folks may have questions about the maps and stuff. So maybe I'll keep it up and then I'll just go back to some of the maps. And so I think you want to talk about how you want to manage this?
Sure. So I'll offer a few of the questions that are included in the chat. We won't have time to go through all of them. And then there is opportunity if you also want to ask a question, you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you. So we'll alternate between some of the questions and the question and answer, the chat, and then some raised hands, and try and get a diversity of voices. So one question, Jen, I'll just start from the question and answer. Oh, and for the person who called in, you can do *9 to raise your hand, and then I'd be able to call on you. So we'll start with a question that Dr. Ann Maris typed in. Someone else also was curious about the response. So can Hayward work with Casper's and Taco Bell to allow an easement to parcel 8? We need to keep traffic off Grove, improve access, and help those businesses with customer traffic.
Yeah, so I think it's a good question. I think it's something that we can explore. We could ask the developer to explore, and so I'm open to looking at that. I mean, I agree with you. I think the more points of access that we have, the better. A couple of things just to think about as we go, if exploring that. One is Foothill is a very busy street, so having, but if you already have the driveway there and it's shared with Casper's, then that might not be an issue. So it'd be a right in, right out. And so, I think it's something we could look at. The other is just the cost, right, of acquiring property from a private property owner. Sometimes it can be very expensive, but there may be a willingness to sell some of that, you're a developer or the property owner may just not want to sell their property. But it's something that I'm willing to, I think it's a good point, and I'm willing to explore, and we can work with the developer to explore further as well.
Okay. And then we'll try and keep if I switch to, I see Ida Alvarez's hand is raised. So Ida, I'll go ahead and have you talk, and then just try and keep your comments or questions brief so we can go through them. So go ahead and unmute yourself, Ida.
The first person that raised my hand.
You are, yes.
Okay.
Hi, Ida.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you, Monica and Jennifer, for having the meetings. And it just, again, I guess I could just express my, concern. You guys have already heard it. And, just talking among my fellow neighbors, and, it just really would be very beneficial if we could have something that's considerate as far as the redevelopment of the existing properties. And also because it's just a huge concern, once again, that I've mentioned in the past with the homelessness that we're having a constant issue with the debris. And we would like more consistency with maintenance on a regular basis. And it seems like something that a lot of us tenants here want. And also just in consideration with the community land trust, it just seems unfortunate that there's very minimal information in regards to exactly how that's going to benefit us in the future, financially, and then also just time-wise. I don't know how that's going to have any good impact on us as tenants who are very limited on financial resources and on fixed incomes. And hopefully the developer that you guys do choose will offer housing resources in addition to the very low income guidelines, and offering us assistance that you guys have also mentioned as well. We just, I just would appreciate, reassurance that that's what's going to happen in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what else to say because I've said quality, but I just hope that you guys will just really consider that. And I do want to mention that I'm also very supportive of Nestor with the Community Land Trust, how he does support us tenants here at Bridgeport. It just doesn't seem like, we just kind of, I don't want to rush you guys, but, we do need something to happen, sooner than later. I know it's not going to happen for another 1 to 3 years, but if you guys can also just consider that, it's just not something that we're looking, I'm not looking for something that has to be like a castle or anything. I just want to be able to live comfortably and live safe in the area where I'm living at now. And it's just unfortunate, but it just doesn't feel that way. And I hope you guys can just consider that.
Okay.
And
Thank you, Ida. Thank you, Ida. I'd love to respond a little bit. I know you've heard some of these responses, and then maybe I'll respond to a couple. And then Monica, maybe you could talk a little bit about the maintenance kind of aspect too, or just mention that what we're doing to kind of address some of those issues. But I think, and I guess I've heard, I think one of the reasons I think you're expressing like this land trust, how does it work? Do we have the resources, and then wanting to be incorporated? And I think we too kind of, I have a lot of questions. I haven't worked on a land trust project before, so I'll be honest. And so we've talked to different experts on it to try to understand it. One of my staff people has done land trust in Oakland. But so we kind of have some of the same questions. And so I think what we've set up, what we're hoping to set up with resources for community development is a 6-month period where we explore these different options and get the information, answer your questions, Ida, answer my questions that I have, the pros and cons of these different options, with the central theme being how do we make sure we try to minimize the displacement impacts. And so that I have some of the same questions, and I think we've set this up so the next 6 months we don't have to wait for 3 years to figure out some of the answers, but over the next 6 months try to work with this nonprofit to help answer the questions you have that I have and see what we think makes the most sense. And work with you. Also, we need to work with the tenants. Like we'll need to have some information from the tenants to be able to make that work, to be able to really get good answers. And so we will want to work closely with you over the next 6 months to try to, I think what I'm hearing from you too, Ida, is all the uncertainty, right? And try to minimize that uncertainty and start to get some answers so we all kind of have a collective understanding of where we're headed. So that's my goal for the next 6 months. Also, yeah, I mean, just in timing being an issue and trying to move it fast. And usually I'm the one that's pushing people along. So it's nice, Ida, that you're pushing me. That's good. And so we like to move fast. We'll try, but it is a complicated site. And so we'll do our best. Monica, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of what's going on with the maintenance?
Yeah, so, obviously there are a number of unhoused individuals who spend their days in the area and sometimes spend nights. And we've been working really closely in partnership with the Hayward Police Department, maintenance services to identify individuals when they're there. And this is also in part, Shireen, to help answer your question. You indicated also that there are a lot of homeless individuals, and what are we doing to help them and offer them services? So wearing my other hat as the community services manager, and my responsibilities include addressing homelessness in Hayward. We have sent our outreach workers there and offered opportunity to stay at our housing navigation center. We did conduct an abatement both on Purse Group 8 and 9, and ended up putting those individuals in hotels. And then also release also offer them outreach services. So we'll continue to target those folks for outreach services and offer them opportunities. They have to accept them. The tricky part is, during COVID times, the CDC has issued guidance that we're not to clear encampments. And so only when there's really like health and fire hazards that rise to a certain level are we able to abate the encampments, and we're required to find housing for them when we do that. So just trying to manage finding enough space to be able to address issues, and then working with our maintenance staff to identify that.
And that is why we conducted the abatement we did, because of some of the fire risk and the need to kind of mitigate for that. And so that is why we did it, because we do understand there have been a couple fires there, and so that was why we moved that forward, despite the CDC guidance.
Jennifer, there's another question that 2 people expressed interest in that should be easy. Are these parcels covered by the Surplus Land Act?
No, these parcels are subject to special legislation related to Caltrans transfer of the property to the city, because of the kind of unique nature of 238 properties being Caltrans or state property before. So they're subject to special legislation. That said, I mean, a lot of these parcels are being developed for affordable housing and housing. I mean, the vast majority of them are, but they're a little different.
I just saw a hand raised.
I think it's Bruce.
Popped right to the top. That's why I didn't see you. Sorry. Bruce, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Bruce King. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm kind of wondering, I got several questions. What input have you gotten from the county on this project? I mean, we hear from Hayward, your guys are like leading the development, but we don't hear from our own unincorporated county as to what they think about how we can make this area, you know, into a better community. And so that's one question. Another is on parcel group 9, the Cherryland parcel, the unincorporated parcel there, that's part of the housing element, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So does that mean that it needs to be affordable housing, or is that not a requirement?
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess the last thing is more of a statement. I keep hearing, you know, I've heard the city council say, hey, you know, it might not be safe to put housing near a freeway. But frankly, I'm looking at this saying, you know, we've got housing everywhere throughout the unincorporated and Hayward areas near freeways. This isn't right next to a freeway. I understand the concerns about air pollution near freeways, but you know, we've got all kinds of housing near freeways. And the last part of that is we're going to electric vehicles in the next 20 to 30 years. So we're actually going to be reducing pollution. So if somebody's going to talk about air pollutants near freeways, they should actually have a study done to say whether or not that's an issue. And if so, it's probably an issue for all kinds of people that live near there, including the people in the new apartments or townhouses that are going in on Oak Street. So I guess a question is what input have you gotten from the county, and then the Cherryland parcel, what's in the housing element, what are we required to do there?
Sure. Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer those. So the county, we have talked to the county a lot, their housing and community development department. We've talked with Supervisor Miley's office a lot, and we have ongoing conversations with them. I mean, I think, you know, they have their zoning and they have their general plan, and the general plan is in the Castro Valley area that was done relatively recently. So I think, you know, I think they're supportive of trying for the city to really focus on trying to develop it consistent with what they've, you know, how they've zoned it. And but yeah, we have ongoing conversations with them. I mean, I think obviously being a city and the property owner, I think they're deferring, you know, they want us to kind of lead, you know, which is, you know, that's fine, but we are in constant conversations with them and talking to them. But they, you know, they want us to be a little bit in the driver's seat, which we appreciate because we're both property owner and city, and so that gives us a little more flexibility, but we are working closely with them and really appreciate their partnership. On parcel group 9, you're right that it is a housing element site, and you're right that it would have to be developed as housing, but just because it's in a housing element site does not mean it has to be developed as affordable housing. But you do have to meet those minimum densities. Because there's certain assumptions that if you meet certain densities, then you're providing housing that's kind of designed to be more affordable to different income ranges. And so housing elements aren't just about affordable housing. They are about market rate housing as well. So it's not a requirement to be affordable housing in this case. And then housing near freeways, I think it's a great point, Bruce. I'd never really thought about it. You're right. I mean, I think we obviously, if we're developing housing in the near term and there's still air quality and emissions issues, we want to try to make sure we, you know, address those issues. But you're right, over time, we're not going to have those same issues. And so thinking more long term, I think, is really smart.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Bruce.
Nestor Castillo asked this question, and someone else also wanted to hear the response, and that's Jennifer, when you say mitigate displacement, can you be a little specific? Obviously the residents would like to hear zero displacement. Is that the goal for the city as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's our goal. I guess absolutely that's our goal. But we also I mean, we haven't dug into, you know, are all the tenants wanting to be a part of the project? Like there may be some people that just don't. And to be honest, you know, we hope this isn't the case, but if they don't want to participate or they don't want to provide income information or they don't want to be a part of the project or have different goals, we can't, you know, there is a certain amount of cooperation that has to occur. It is both sides have to kind of work together, and because we can't control what all the tenants do or what their choices are. I can't tell you 100% guaranteed. I can tell you that that is our goal. But we have to work through a lot of tough, we have to get all this information. We got to work through some of these issues, and we will work very closely and transparently with the tenants about all of those. And RCD, that's one of the reasons we chose them as a partner, because we think they will too. But it is a relationship, and so that's why I just can't say 100% guaranteed.
I see now Vicky's raising her hand, so I'm gonna go ahead and Vicky, you're on. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for having these meetings, and I've appreciated it. I've been following this for about 15 years. It's good to see something finally happening. I have a couple broad-ranging questions. As I understood it, the original sales agreement with the City of Hayward and Caltrans, you had a specific timeline before those properties had to go back to Caltrans. Has that timeline gone away with COVID or with this purchase agreement that you have? The other thing is more geared toward HARD and the trail development, because they're also working on their winding up their general plan for their trails throughout the city. When this foothill trail goes through, not if, when, I think they would be better off with a non-asphalt heat absorbing material and rather use a decomposed granite or something that would be ADA compliant, just keep up more with the natural state of the area. And that's all I have.
Great, thanks, Vicki. I like the suggestion for the trail, and we can pass that along to HARD. That's great. In terms of the timeline, we did have a 5-year timeline, which would expire in January of 2022 due to COVID and all of just the kind of the impact that's had on the real estate market and the economy. We have talked with Caltrans and essentially obtained agreement to extend that for 5 years. And we will be taking the amendment to the purchase and sale agreement with Caltrans to the council on September 15th, Monica, is that right? September 15th. I think we're going September 15th with some items and the 22nd, but I think it's September 15th. We're going to take that agreement to the city council. If it's approved, then Caltrans has already agreed to sign that, and then they would sign it. So we'd have a 5-year extension. So that would put us at 2027. Is that, if I can do math when I'm on a community meeting. But yeah, so we did, Vicki, get an extension because of the COVID crisis. So that gives us a little more time, but as you heard from Ida, like, and yourself too, it's like, how long have you been waiting for some of this? So I don't think we want to put our brakes on too much. We think we have good plans, especially the public benefit components that aren't necessarily dependent on the private investment and market conditions. So I think we'd really want to keep moving on the open space and the affordable housing and try to get something developed here as quickly as we can.
So I have a question from Shireen that she sent in a chat just to us, but I think she intended to have everyone see it. And it's, can we have some kind of clause in the agreement with RCD that they have to do certain things and not just take this land and do what they want, as has happened with Eden Housing?
Yes, so what we're taking to the council is just an exclusive negotiating agreement on September 22nd. So that doesn't, they don't have any rights to our land, and they don't have any obligation to develop anything. At that, all we would be saying on September 22nd is, let's talk to each other. Let's see the way I describe it as an engagement, right? You're getting engaged, but you're not married yet. And so you kind of, let's see if we think we can make this work. And we have discussions. We try to hash out some of these complications and things and really get a clear understanding of kind of what Nestor raised too, of like, hey, can we really address the displacement issues? And we work through some of those issues together. If at the end of that negotiating period, we come to an agreement on the terms of what we call a disposition and development agreement, that's like the marriage contract. And that is a contract where we would not only, to get at your point, we do not give them our land and just say, oh, whatever you want, right? That's what Caltrans, I mean, I'm not trying to be nothing negative against Caltrans, but what Caltrans would have done is just sold it to the highest bidder and said, just go, we'll figure it out. private developer. That is not what we're doing here. We want affordable housing. We would require them to kind of meet the obligations. We'd agree to the terms, they would agree to them, and then we would have performance milestones in the DDA, and we would say you can only develop this under these terms, and all of those terms would be publicly disclosed and discussed. So we care very much about how this gets developed, and we'd be very explicit about that with the community. And I will say that that would happen at the same time they would be getting their entitlement application. So we wouldn't give them the land until they actually got their project approved. So everyone, including the city council and the community, you would know what their project is at the same time that the terms of the development agreement they'd happen all at the same time. So we wouldn't have any doubt about what the project actually would be.
Thank you. And remind me, what time should we?
I think we had this till 7, but I mean, I'm happy if I don't know how many, I mean, I'm happy to go to like 7:15, 7:20, or I mean, we could, I'm fine trying to answer some more questions if that works.
We haven't gotten through a number of the typed in questions to answer, so I'm going to go ahead and pick one more.
Okay.
This is also from Dr. Maris. How is Hayward assuring that the development is designed for safe walkability, not car-centric? For example, does each parcel 8 house need a street leading into a driveway, use modern parking, walking concepts? What are the healthy living design considerations that will serve existing neighbors as well as new residents?
Yeah, so that all gets done, that would get incorporated into a site plan, and the site plan would get reviewed and approved by the county if it's in the county, or by the city if it's in the city. And then, that's public, and we could talk about that, and we'd expect any developer, like for the middle segment, well, any of the developers would have to have community outreach, and we require, in fact, an outreach plan, so that we're sure that these developers are engaging the neighbors, and you could see their site plan and see what they're thinking in terms of parking ratios, or where their streets are and how their streets are designed, what the streets look like, how wide they are, how much sidewalk. And so all of that gets kind of outlined in a site plan that would be available publicly for discussion.
And I see that I have another caller. So callers, if you would like to raise your hand and speak, you would dial *9, and that would show that you're raising your hand. I do have, Ida is raising her hand again. And I'm just trying to.
Let's go through some of the more of the Q&A.
Yeah.
I mean, Ida, if we have time, we can get to you, but I'd like to make sure we get to other folks' questions.
Jamila Afandi asked, is there a landscape architect firm and urban design firm working on this?
So we did hire someone to kind of help us on a very conceptual level design workshop, and Bar Architects, who I've worked with on other projects, are really good. But at this stage, what we'd really do is each of these developments, because when we talk about dividing them up into 3 segments, each of them would have developers, or in the case of Hard, obviously Hard, and they would then hire their own landscape architects, their own building architects that would be part of the team in developing that site plan, any architectural designs. So right now we don't have anyone under contract to do that work, because we're really wanting the developers to pick that up and do it. We kind of took it to the conceptual level, and you always want to be careful as a city with public land going too far, because developers really like to have some ability to craft the plans in a way that meets their own needs. And so we kind of have stopped, and then the developers will then pick up that planning, that more detailed planning, as part of their process.
Max asked, what is the purchase price for these parcels?
So it's $41,000 per unit. In this case, because of kind of our arrangement with Caltrans, the affordable units will not have to kind of pay that. And so that's why, and so that was one of the benefits of creating that market rate housing on the middle segments, is to not have the affordable housing or the open space be subject to that purchase price.
And Jenny wanted some clarification. With the, she typed in, would this be market rate housing in the city portion? And I believe she typed it in when we were looking at the middle parcel, but if you just review,
Yeah,
I think that'd be helpful.
sure. So when we talk about the middle segment, It's this kind of lighter green and this orange. This is what we're calling the middle segment, and I'll switch to it so you can see. But that would be developed as one kind of uniform development, and that would be all market rate housing. So I'm just going to go to that segment, Jenny, so you can see it again. So this shows this development. You see where you see this would be developed. This is the city's kind of landlocked portion. This is the county portion in the middle segment. And this would be developed as market rate housing. Really with the focus on value and kind of lower density, I mean, as low as we can given the current zoning and general plan there, but kind of generating the purchase, money for the purchase price and satisfying Caltrans.
And Nestor Castillo has his hand raised, so I'm gonna allow him to talk. And Nestor, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, Jennifer. Thank you again for the presentation and for providing this information. I'm curious to know if RCD is open to working with the Land Trust, and I know that RCD has worked with Oakland Community Land Trust in the past. And so I'm curious to know if you get a sense of where RCD is in that process in this sort of exploration phase.
Yeah, they are open to it because we have an agreement that says they're going to explore it. They've told us they're willing to explore it. They also want to, we've asked them to explore all three of those options I talked about. And I'm just going to go to that, Nestor, so we can look at those options together. So there's the community land trust, the rental rehab of existing units, and then new construction. In all cases, we'd be looking to have that goal of kind of minimizing displacement. But yes, they are open. Like you said, they have some experience in that. I think there's questions though, right? And they don't have all the information yet. And so we all need more information to be able to make a decision about which option to pursue, but they are open to exploring that for sure.
Carmen and Omar typed in, how high will the townhomes be? I assume it's on the market rate housing piece if they had that question.
Yeah, I don't know until the developers come in, but the product that we're seeing, I don't know in terms of, how high in terms of feet it would really be the developer have to say, but there are height limits in that area that the county has. We'd have to follow all those county height limits. Usually townhomes in the rest of, like in Hayward that are getting built are 3 stories. But if there are height limits, they may only be 2 stories, and some of the townhomes are 2 stories, so it'd be 2 to 3 stories. Maybe the ones that are a little lower would be 3 stories. Maybe the ones that are a little higher, where you have some of the height limit, would be 2. But that would all get worked out with the developer.
And Christy Bascom asked, would the city consider mandating any affordable for sale townhome units mixed within the 100 market rate townhomes in the middle section?
I'm sorry, Monica, say that one more time.
Sure. Would the city consider mandating any affordable for sale townhome units mixed within the 100 market rate townhomes in the middle section?
Yeah, I think we are looking at that on parcel group 6 and some of the other parcels, but really the kind of negotiation and the discussion with Caltrans is if they're going to let us move forward without a land price on the affordable side and the open space, then they're wanting to maximize the value and have the middle parcel essentially be market rate. So they're sure that they get repaid for the money that they put into this and when they acquired it and kind of. So we won't be looking at any affordable on the middle segment. When you think about it, and what the affordable really does is help to satisfy that affordable housing requirement for the middle segment, and the open space satisfies those open space requirements. And so that was why Caltrans was willing to allow us to move forward with affordable housing and the open space on a faster timeline and not hold up those pieces for us to get their money, pay them their money. So so at this point, this development's not going to have that, but or that's not the proposal. But we are looking at affordable homeownership opportunities, especially on parcel group 6.
Isaac is raising his hand, so I'll go ahead and Isaac, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh, hi. Yeah, hi, this is Isaac. I live not too far from the parcels, and just following up on the question of the townhomes, could you explain a little more just in terms of, I understand the need for repaying Caltrans for the land cost, but You know, when it comes to affordable developments and applying for funding, I understand that there is usually the land cost can be taken into account as a cost of the project. So ultimately, Caltrans could get the money paid for down the line, and it could still have an affordable, at least part of it could be multifamily affordable. I think it's a lot of land to be using for such a low density use and for market rate housing when we're just so desperately need low income housing. And in fact, Hayward has already exceeded the production RENA goals for market rate.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think it's all a balancing act. I mean, we are planning a 100% multifamily rental project on the corner. That's the one I have up here on the screen in pink. And so we're thinking is somewhere between 75 to 100 units of deed restricted, low income, very low income, affordable housing. So that is where we're wanting to do that. And so that kind of satisfies the affordable housing requirement and really, again, needing to make sure that we can pay Caltrans back. And that was the only way. Otherwise, they wouldn't authorize us to allow us to move forward with affordable housing and the open space separately. But that said, we could talk with the developer on the middle segment about could they create some smaller townhomes that maybe they're not deed restricted for affordable, but maybe they're just constructed and designed a little smaller so that you're reaching different income levels. And usually developers want to do some of this anyway because they want to sell units faster. And if you have different product types, then they can sell them faster. So we could talk to the developer about incorporating some smaller townhome units that even if they're not deed restricted affordable, they could be more affordable to maybe those first time home buyers, even if they're still just market rate units.
I see Dr. Ann Maris's hand raised, so I'm gonna.
Well, and I think she commented already or had some questions. I was just wondering why don't we let Ida, if Ida wants to speak again, then if we're gonna let.
Sure, and I'd also included, oh, I guess she, her hand got lowered. Okay.
So Ida, but just if you don't mind, since there are other folks on the line, if you don't, just keep it.
Yeah, that's fine.
Quick.
No
Yeah,
problem. I just sent my question about if RCD doesn't guarantee that we won't be displaced, are you guys going to consider another developer or other options? Because you guys kind of guaranteed that we weren't going to be displaced. And that is also a concern. I don't think that would really be anything that would, yeah, I think that would be the main concern with everybody else here living. I'm sure the other tenants don't want to just be bothered and that they, whatever you guys have to offer, just offer it and see what they say. And then even with the existing, I was just thinking about the other portions of Bridgeport here, maybe you guys could do a variety of like small townhouses or something, just so maybe people who could afford, to buy, that property as well. That might be an option too.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree that the site is larger, and so there might be some opportunities for the new construction to kind of those two parcels to be thought of as kind of one in a development. I mean, the only reason I just can't guarantee our goal, and I know that it's just there may not be the trust, or it just may not. You just have to kind of wait and see. Unfortunately, I mean, I can't. But is that in our experience? I mean, there are just some tenants that just may not want to participate at all if they don't provide income information, for instance. We can't help, or if they just we put a bunch of options in front of them, they just refuse, and all of them, like we just can't control everybody. So it's the only reason I can't, because it does take two to come to an agreement. I can tell you that we're absolutely committed and have designed this entire corner parcel around trying to mitigate those impacts and to try to incorporate all, as many tenants as we possibly can into the development. I mean, that is our goal. I can tell you, like even Nestor's question, our goal is zero displacement. That is our goal. I just can't tell you 100% that we can do that because we don't control all the tenants and all of the choices that they need to make for their lives as well. So, and I just can't say anything that any tenant wants we can give them, right? I mean, we just don't know yet because we haven't started those conversations. But our goal is zero displacement, but we can't guarantee it right now until we get into the details and have more information and really work closely with the tenants. And I know that's just not satisfying to you, Ida, and I'm sorry, but I just want to be honest too. I don't want to promise something I can't deliver on either.
So I see that the Chairland Community Association is also raising their hand. So I'll allow them to talk, and then go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, hi, this is Michael Freed. I'm actually, my computer, it shows up as Cherryland Community Association, but I did want to, what do we have, 3 minutes or whatever? Is this public comment?
Well, it's just a community meeting, so we just ask
Yeah,
that
that's
we've
fine.
got a
So,
lot of other people, so just, you know, be
right,
cognizant of that.
yeah, and I just wanted to relinquish some of my time to get back.
Well, we
Yes,
lost you in
but-
terms of
Michael, you're
sound.
fading in and out.
Okay, can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to, Ann Maris to come back on and say whatever else she wants to say, but something that I've been thinking about is, and it may be jumping ahead or going back a little bit in terms of the developers that are going to be working with this property. How are the developers chosen, and does the community have any say into which organizations or companies or whatever actually get the contracts? And part of that is wondering who the architects are that are in this, involved with all these things. Just a rhetorical question as far as being able to meet with these folks when they start designing whatever they're going to do for the building, and you know, keeping in mind what's available for open space or not, and how that might be incorporated. And it's just a little bit, maybe a broad question, is to, you know, will there be an opportunity for the selection of the developer, whoever that happens to be. But anyway, I'll throw it back to Ann if she wants to, you know.
Yeah, and we'll get back to Ann. I'm happy to have Ann speak
Yeah,
as well
great.
one more time.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean,
Well,
we have about 13. I mean, I think we'll probably stop around 7:30. So we'll make sure Ann, if she wants
yeah.
to talk again, that's fine.
And
But
then if I have any other questions, I'll raise my hand again.
yeah, great. Or put them in the Q&A, and you know, anyone that has a Q&A answer that we didn't get to, I should have said, you know, we will put a Q&A document together and make sure we respond so that you can see the answers if we're just not able to get to them tonight.
Okay, so we can enter stuff on the chat.
If you can do the Q&A, we'll track the chat too, but yeah, preferably in the Q&A.
Thank
Great.
you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Jennifer.
Yeah, nice to talk to you again. So
I'll put I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to answer, but then do you want to? Okay, so let me just answer quickly is that, you know, I've done developer solicitations in a lot of different ways. I think for the middle segment, I think this site is very complicated. And so I think in the economy is a little uncertain. So I think what we would probably do is go out to the development community and to the broker community and say, hey, you know, we'd like to solicit letters of interest from developers on this property. Here's kind of our requirements. Give us a kind of submittal or a proposal. And we're still, again, I don't have it all figured out yet, and I'm open to feedback. And then it's usually, we would go through, you know, it would be a public meeting where we would kind of make a recommendation, we'd explain why. And so it's usually a very public process about, you know, how they were selected, why they were selected, who else proposed. And we usually have them kind of reach out to the community, or we talk to the community about before we take anything to the council. So we try to include the community in that, and then the developer is required to do an outreach plan and engage the community as part of their negotiation process and their entitlement process. So then they re-engage the community. And so that's how we anticipate it going here. But I'm open to some other thoughts as well. I think those were his questions or thoughts. So why don't we see if Ann, you want to ask another question?
Yeah, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, there you go. Hi. Yeah, it's Ann Maris. So I'm the organizer here of Groveway Neighborhood, and I'm also one of the founding members of the Eden Community Land Trust. And it would be really important. Well, actually, let me thank you first, because so far this has been such a great meeting, and all the comments you've received have been really great. And the idea of working with RCD seems to be a pretty good idea. And what I'm not hearing is that you've had much interaction with My Eden Voice, and RCD works with My Eden Voice. So wouldn't it be amazing if a developer, wouldn't it be exciting for a developer to come into a project where there are so many community groups supporting it already, so you know that it's going to get built, and it's going to get built as quickly as possible? So I just encourage you, Yeah, so I just encourage you to look at all the community groups that are here and look at the demographics and think of how we can have a development that's not too disruptive to all of our lives. So that would include things like catering to older people. We have the senior center, the retirement home. That would include keeping busier traffic out on busier streets and having natural areas stay somewhat natural and safe so they could be enjoyed by children and old people. That would be maybe having, like one of the speakers that called wanted denser development and was surprised that it was so low. You know, wouldn't it be great if he could help us figure out how we could get denser development, you know, and still keep the little places where the wildlife can hide. So half of this property, I guess, about or something is Castro Valley. And in Castro Valley, one of our goals is to maintain the rural feel. And it's really important to the character of the neighborhood, as well as we're learning to health and all that stuff. And so how can we make this development near a freeway and have it actually be nice and be what all these plans talk about? I mean,
Yeah.
and it could be such a model development if we could actually get cohesion with the foothill commercial strip, and then with these super delicate areas like Ruby Meadow, and to have access within 1 mile of that. That would be incredible, to open up the springs here along Grove Way and make the bridges and the even the Creekway Trail along the channel be something that's accessible, you know, where it's and beautiful. So anyway, I could go on forever. Thank you for allowing everyone the opportunity to talk and for your expertise in hopefully bringing, you know, all the diverse groups together and satisfying everyone. Why not?
Yeah. Thank you, Anne. And I appreciate your passion for your community. And I think you know, that's, you know, my career has been in public land development with the goal of trying to see a community vision realized. I can tell you it's not easy, and it's not, doesn't mean everyone always gets everything they want, to be honest, even the city, right? I mean, I think there's always going to be some trade-offs because development's complicated and hard, but I can tell you my goal and why I'm working for a city developing real estate instead of for a private company, for instance, is to try to do that, to try to achieve just what you said. And so I think that is our goal. That's what we want. That's why we're having all these community meetings and we're trying to kind of thread the needle of trying to balance all these things. And that's our goal. But again, just like I said to Ida, I mean, I can't guarantee everyone's going to get everything they want because development's too complicated. And at the end of the day, you still have to make it pencil, and financially it has to make sense. And so there is a push and pull on a lot of these issues. But I can tell you, Monica and I are going to try to achieve that for you and do our best to see what we can kind of pull off and work. And I think one of the ways to do it is to keep all those groups involved, and so that they can kind of put their mark on it and try to kind of adapt it to be something that people can be proud of. And that's what we hope we'll achieve here.
So I have Matt Turner raising his hand, and it's the sort of next question I would have read. So I'll just have him.
And then it's 7:25. So maybe we'll take, what do you think? We'll take Matt and then 2 more questions. Monica, does that seem okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Matt,
hey,
go ahead
Matt.
and mute yourself. And then try again.
Okay.
I'm going to mute you. I'm sorry, Matt. I'm going to go ahead and ask the question you put in the Q&A, and then you can always use the chat feature as well. So Matt asked, ending poverty versus servicing poverty is a major policy shift that groups like the Eden Community Land Trust are working on. Given that A, one of the largest budget expenditures of the county is servicing poverty, and B, home ownership is the greatest overall engine of wealth creation for Californians, are there efforts to negotiate with the state to lower or eliminate the cost of the transfer to offer more heavily subsidized ownership options of low and very low income residents?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a good question. It's something our city council is talking a lot about in terms of wealth generation and having more ownership opportunities. And so I think it's something, I think the city shares that goal. I think we did negotiate, what we did negotiate was their willingness to work with us to allow us to move forward with zero kind of land price for, or land for the affordable housing development. And so that's, in our view, that was huge, was that we can move forward the affordable housing, get those 75 to 100 units without having to pay Caltrans at all for any of those units. And so that is what we kind of tried to do. I think, we can keep talking about the ownership. I think rental, I think, and we can talk about that when we get into the options for the community land trust versus the rental rehab of existing units, because I think they both provide, the community land trust, for those who aren't as familiar with it, is a way to kind of keep the land in a nonprofit trust. And I might not get this 100% right because I too am learning about it, but then the tenants essentially own the improvements or the units that they're in. But even that, their resale, well, there will be resale restrictions on those. So they won't be able to just turn it around and make a profit off of it and generate a bunch of wealth like you would on a market rate unit. So even though it provides stability is what it does, it isn't necessarily a model for wealth generation like you would for a market rate unit, or creating units that are smaller that allow first-time home buyers to buy a market rate unit. So I just want to kind of caution everyone. I mean, it's still a way to generate some ownership and have some more potential, but it isn't its primary focus, my understanding, and is stability. Rental rehab kind of also provides some of that, whereas if you're only paying 30% of your income on housing, most people in the Bay Area now are paying a lot more than that on housing. And if now in a rental rehab unit you're paying only 30% of your income, are you able then to take some of that money that you might have otherwise been paying for housing and put that into an account to save for a home? So it doesn't mean, community land trust doesn't mean, it's not the only way to start to kind of build ownership potential or wealth generation. But I think it is a model that's becoming more and more popular for all the reasons that Matt just said. And I think we want to explore it and see if it's something that we can make happen here or make sense here. And honestly, what we'll do, I'm just telling you, we'll be very honest about, here's a community land trust, here are the pros and cons, here's rental rehab of existing units, pros and cons, and we can all look at it together and kind of think about what makes the most sense for this parcel and for RCD and for the city and for the tenants. And I don't have all those answers right now. I want to do that analysis and look at it with you again.
Michael has his hand raised again. And
are there any Q&A that we haven't answered?
There any unique questions? Or sorry, questioners. There are unique questions, but not unique questioners. So,
okay, well, why don't we do Michael, and then we'll take one more question that we haven't answered from the Q&A, and then again, we can put this in a Q&A response, any of the questions we didn't get to tonight.
Michael, go ahead and unmute yourself. We can't hear you, but it looks like you're unmuted, so maybe you're double muted.
Ooh, what's a double mute? I don't know what that is.
You're mute on the app and on your phone.
Oh. We still can't hear you, Michael.
You have yourself on mute.
Okay, now you're unmuted.
We still can't hear you, I'm sorry.
But if you want to take a second, Michael, to put something in the Q&A, then we can try to answer your question. And maybe while we do that, Monica, why don't we take one of the other Q&A and then...
Yeah, so Carmen and Omar asked, how will an increase of homes affect traffic for existing residents?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think more housing means more cars. So I'm not going to stand here and say that there won't be impacts. There'll be more cars in the neighborhood, driving to school or driving to work, or obviously less now, right, because of COVID, but that won't hopefully be the forever. And so there will be some impacts. I think things we can do to mitigate that are some of the things that Anne talked about, like, can we create some trails and some walkable spaces so people could walk safely and easily down to Foothill and take the bus downtown? There's a lot of buses that run very frequently on Foothill. Could we get people there safely and walkable? If we had a trail on the Foothill Trail that got down to Hayward BART, would people ride their bikes to BART instead of driving their cars? And so we can try to do things like that. In all of our projects, we required developers to work on what's called transportation demand management, so to minimize reliance on cars. So maybe provide all the, maybe provide the residents of some of these developments with free bus passes, so that they're more likely to use transit. But again, I want to be really honest, like that doesn't mean no one's going to drive. People are going to drive, but what we can try to do is minimize some of that by creating walkable spaces around, trying to create incentives for them to use other modes of transportation. But there will be more cars, and this is what's, having been in the real estate, development field for a long time, whenever you're talking about new housing, there's always concerns about traffic, always, and understandably, right? Because people care about the quality of life of their community and they don't want to see that impacted. On the other hand, the quality of our lives are impacted by not having enough affordable housing for the people that live in our community. So we have to balance traffic impacts with needing more housing desperately to try to create a more sustainable community. So there's not a really good answer to that. I mean, our hope is to try to mitigate it and try to do it safely, try to create, like Anne and others were saying, maybe we can create another access point off Foothill so that not everyone drives through Grove Way and tries to minimize that. So we can try to do things like that. But there's no way to develop housing without having more cars yet. But like Bruce was saying, maybe there, in the future, we can imagine a world without that, but we're not there yet. So there is a trade-off with building more housing with traffic. All right, Michael, we want to try them one more last time and then we'll. All right, Michael, let's try. Let's hope this works.
Michael, go ahead and unmute yourself.
He looks unmuted. Yeah, unfortunately, Michael, we can't hear you. I apologize. Okay, I think we're at 7:30. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and then if there are any questions that didn't get answered in the Q&A, we promise to record our or get our answers and make sure that we have those available so that everyone gets their questions answered. And we'll have this PowerPoint and we'll have this recording available. So if you know someone that couldn't make it because they had to work or something else, then they'll be able to go back and watch it another time.
I'll send you all, we have your email addresses since you all signed in. So I'll circulate this recording or notification when it gets posted, in addition to the survey link, in case you have neighbors you'd like to share so we can collect their feedback as well.
Yep. And just like to say thank you to Monica too for all her hard work putting this together too. So thank you, Monica. And thanks to everyone who came. We really appreciate all your feedback. And thanks for bearing with us on our first community meeting, our first virtual community meeting. So thank you, everybody. Have a good night and stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.